my great pleasure to welcome Minister Hunter to our conference. And just a brief biography here. Minister Ian Hunter was born in Broken Hill, educated at Gillis Plains High and Flinders University. It's my alma mater. Latter resulting in Bachelor of Science in Microbiology and Genetics. Worked as a research assistant at Flinders Medical Centre, youth worker at Child and Youth Services and policy advisor. The Minister was first elected to the South Australian Legislative Council in 2006. He became a Minister in 2011. Minister Hunter is currently the Minister of Sustainability, Environment and Conservation, and the Minister for Water and the River Murray, and the Minister for Climate Change. Leanne had the pleasure of working with Minister last year on the Carbon Neutral Adelaide project and has seen his passion for and commitment to the environment. I've also worked and fondly enjoy our meetings together with Minister Hunter, where we advocate for Landcare. So thank you very much and welcome, Minister.
Well, thank you, Jerry. It's good to know that you've gone to the world's greatest university, Flinders University, along with me and many others, I'm sure, from this room. Can I pay my respects to start off with to the traditional owners of the country we're on today, the Ngadjuri people, and I'd like to acknowledge once again our collective understanding of their ongoing long spiritual attachment to country, and it's an attachment to country that I think all of us are starting to understand better and hopefully to share. I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about Landcare, obviously, but also a little bit about our work as a state government and as a community in terms of what we're doing for the future of our state in terms of the environment, conservation, and how we look at country, if you like. I'd like to, of course, start out by thanking sincerely the Landcare Association of SA for their ongoing commitment to the sustainable use of land, modern land management practices, and I clearly pay a deep sense of thanks and recognition to you for your ongoing contribution to the state of South Australia, to our present, past and future prosperity, but also our desire to have a sustainable future as well. Now, I understand the theme of your conference this year is to celebrate innovation and diversity. And I think that gives us an opportunity to reflect on some of our achievements to date and also gives us a starting point to look forward and plan to the future. I understand you've had some pretty interesting presentations today. Some of you have already been out and touring some of the different areas of the regions, and I don't just mean the wineries, of course, but some of those are excellent examples too of how we can work with business and industry in better ways than we have done in the past. But you've seen firsthand some of the successful ways that industries and communities here have worked through innovative practices and sustainable practices on their land and put in place new management practices here and more generally across the Northern and York region of our state. The region, I think, provides a fantastic example which really encapsulates, even though the geography is incredibly different, how we approach Landcare right across the state. It brings together businesses, local communities, farmers, environmental groups, townies, and people who live out in the country. And it brings them all together to talk about how we work as a community to manage our natural resources into the future. Some of the things that some of you saw yesterday, I think, include innovative medical treatments from anti-venom experiments in sheep, sustainable agricultural production, and a whole range of examples of how our community leads some of these incredible projects. There are a few examples. There are many, many, many more for you in this region to discover of how innovation and sustainability can be brought into our everyday lives and the work we do and not be a drag on efficiency or production, but in fact enhance it incredibly well. And this is the message we need to get out when we're talking to our communities about sustainable natural resource management. These examples, as I said, are similar right across the state. even though they might be put to a singular local geographic use. It's slightly different from here. But we're trying to utilise world-leading practices. Either we steal them from somebody else, like that leading state now, WA, or from overseas. And in a similar way, we also develop them here locally, and we're very keen to share them with other people. Because I think, and I've said this many times about many of the things that we lead in as a state, it's no good South Australia going out and bragging that we've done fantastic things for 40 years and no one else has copied us or it has taken that long. Whilst that's good for South Australia, we understand that the impact on the environment is right across the nation. Indeed, it's right across the world. And the only way we get a benefit that is more broad than our South Australian environment is if everybody picks up on these good ideas like container deposit legislation and introduces it in their own area. So we're very keen to share what we've learnt, the good examples and also the mistakes that we've made along the way as well, so that other people can avoid them. And as I said, in many respects, the Northern and York region of our state is, if you like, an example of other areas where we have incredible diversity, incredibly successful business enterprises, cereal farming here, sheep and cattle, vineyards, mining, fishing, all coexisting together, all built around, or hopefully trying to move them to build around, a better, a more sustainable use of the natural resources so that it is there for the future as well as today. Now, we all understand, I think, that natural resources vitally underpin every aspect of our lives. Our lifestyles, our livelihoods, everything depends on our natural resources, and therefore you need to have a mentality to leave something behind, not to strip mine it today to maximise your profit and efficiency today, but understand you'll need to come back tomorrow. And your children will need to come back in their years into the future to have the same sustainable future that you want. So that means we need to be wise managers of our natural environment and these resources and landscapes. We need to see them not as individual units of economic benefit, but as interconnected communities that have impacts one on the other. You can't have an impact in agricultural practices, for example, that won't have an impact downstream and eventually into the oceans, where our fishing industries are located. There is not an ability for any of us to single out and isolate an impact on a particular area, because there are impacts that are much broader than that and they spread. So we need to think in that more holistic way. We need to change the way that we connect with our day-to-day business, our industries, our weekends, the way we recreate, because everything is connected. And of course, you will be experiencing, if you haven't already, you will be, our Northern and York region is recognised as one of the state's premium food and wine producing regions. It's a great example, I think, of how a community has embraced the idea that sustainable land management is not only good for the economy of the region, but it's actually good for the environment and it's good for human beings as well. South Australian Government has always recognised that we can't do things on our own as a government. We need, if we want to effect change in this state, to bring communities along with us. If we can, we'd like communities to lead this change. It makes my life a lot easier if I have people shouting at me, asking me to do things that are going to make life better, rather than shouting at me to stop doing things that government's doing because it's making things bad for people. So by having communities lead, it means that I have already been told that the great majority of people think this is a good idea. The hard work of persuasion around an idea has been done, and communities come to me and say, we've talked about it, we've agreed on this course of action, we now want the government to get behind it. From us, that's an indicator of success. And by working with organisations such as Landcare, for example, and all the volunteers that do so much for our local communities, we want to continue to protect and restore and sustainably manage our state's natural environment, and of course, therefore, its future productivity. Now, in March of 2016, the state government has formalised our ongoing relationship through a mutual agreement between the Landcare Association of South Australia and the state's 8 regional NRM boards. This ongoing partnership, I think, provides a very strong foundation for ongoing innovation and sustainable land management with our community involvement in decision making. Today is not the day for me to talk to you about NRM, although other people will be doing some of that, I think, during the course of your discussions. But just to leave you with a very quick snapshot of, in my mind, what NRM is. We have a model in this state, backed by legislation, which you might think is a common sense thing to do, but that's not the situation in every state, where we try to get the best of both worlds. You can have a model where NRM sits wholly in government and is driven by me as Minister through public service in Adelaide, going out to the whole state and delivering ultimatums about what shall be done. Or, as it exists in other states, you can have NRMs that are locally constituted and funded, and essentially what they do is duplicate programs that are done elsewhere. They reinvent the wheel often, sometimes because they're not actually functioning at the highest level of modern terms of governance and accountability. They sometimes make mistakes, quite serious ones. So what we've done in South Australia over many, many years is try to bring those two ends together and meet them in the middle. As best we can, have community-led NRMs, and as best we can, have the best level of governance and accountability that government would normally apply. Now that means, obviously, there are some controls over NRMs that some people sort of don't like, but it means then that the taxpayer and the funder has some confidence that there's a level of accountability there that may not always otherwise be there. But it also means that there is a local community control and representation, and NRM boards, rather than me in Adelaide, make decisions about how money will be spent locally. There's always an ability to move the slide one way or the other, but at the end of the day you have to pick a system and you try to make that system work as effectively as possible. I think, well, it doesn't really matter what I think, the Commonwealth Government thinks we have the best NRS system in the country. And their reports that have come out and are published frequently have highlighted the South Australian NRM system functions at the highest level in the country. So I think we've probably got that relationship right. Then how does NRM work with other organisations such as Landcare, which is the point I was making earlier? By associating across the state through all the NRM boards, but working locally, we can actually talk to programs and people and to communities and to environmental groups and broad, diverse organisations about how you can input specific local solutions for specific local problems without having come through me in Adelaide and getting a tick off from the bureaucracy. I think that gives a degree of flexibility that otherwise wouldn't exist in the system, with also that degree of certainty of funding continuity. And that's kind of important for programs because we all know the disaster that is 12-month funding cycles. When you get funded for 12 months to do a project, that comes to an end and the caravan's moved on, the funding's not available anymore. We need to get around that, and long-term understandings with organisations like Landcare, which give you 3 or 4 year funding programs, is where I'd like to be into the future. So that's what NRM and Landcare are working towards, a long-term understanding of priorities and how we work together and how we can have some confidence that that will last into the longer term rather than the short term. I think this delivers very important outcomes for our natural environment. It delivers very important outcomes for local communities to know that we'll be there with them into the long haul. And it will deliver, I think, for local and regional economies in sustaining, for example, tourism opportunities. A lot of our regional economies in this state are heavily dependent on tourism, and it's for that reason that I've actually outsourced a Department of Environment staffer into the Tourism Commission so that we can draw more closely together our environmental offerings, our parks and our wilderness, and get a closer understanding of what the tourists want when they come to South Australia. And that close cooperation has led, for example, to the state government investing about $5 million into the Kangaroo Island Wilderness Walking Trail, which has achieved far more than most of us ever expected at the outset, getting into the some internet thing, what is it, TripAdvisor or something like that, the top 3 new entries in the world. And if that doesn't attract people to South Australia and KI for the walking trail, nothing else will. But it just shows you a bit of clever thinking, a little bit of resource, putting government sectors closer together to work more closely in a regional area does pay huge dividends. And we're keen to see more of that happen as well. Tourism, of course, is a very significant sector for the South Australian economy. It contributes about $6 billion a year to our state. It employs a huge number of people. And our Nature Like Nowhere Else, nature-based tourism strategy, sets out an action plan which really tasks the government and the tourism sector to work more closely together in the way that I've just outlined. We want to increase the number of visitors, obviously, to our state. We want to increase the number of days and nights that they spend in our state, because that has a direct flow on for jobs and employment in the tourism sector. And we want people to get out and see our regions. We want them to get out and see what we have to offer right across the state, because that means, just by the nature of the size of our state, they'll spend more time here, and that means more time spending money and driving our regional economies. So that means then, if we're going to attract tourists to these great offerings that our state has, we have to become excellent stewards of those offerings. We have to become the best managers we can possibly be of our natural resources, not just for the benefit of the environment, although many people will say that's the only benefit we need, but also to support local communities and the industries that depend on them, and we have to look after them for the long-term future. Now, I think in comparison, as I said, we have a pretty good system for managing our natural resources in South Australia. We are open. We want to collaborate. We want to work with NGOs. We want to work with organisations that have similar objectives to ours. And this has built up this sense of working together and collaboration and finding innovative solutions to our problems over many, many years of hard work of our public servants, hard work of local communities, hard work on behalf of our NGOs. I think this is something we can be incredibly proud of. We are one of the very few natural resource management systems, as I said, that is supported by specific legislation. We are one of the very few NRM systems that has a levy in place to equitably share the costs of supporting these natural resources between communities and industries. And our 8 natural resource management centres are provided with boards who are elected or nominated from the local community, and I think I elect them, to actually run their plans for their local regions locally. They make decisions, they consult their regions and their organisations in those regions about what priorities the community wants the money spent on, and then they make those determinations, not me. And I think that's a good thing. They can be, when they're operating at their best, a fantastic way of connecting communities. They also are a fantastic way of hooking up communities with government and with industries and business. I'm really pleased that the NRM boards in this state and other statewide leaders, such as Landcare SA, are now working together, as I outlined at the beginning, through their NRM investment strategy, to work together to leverage our unique strengths in our state and to make sure that the offerings that we have to attract people to our state are there for the long haul. We have a great track record of collaboration, and I want that to continue into the longer term. I think that's part of our DNA in South Australia. I was talking to someone earlier this morning about why that may be, and I think we've grown up that way because we are a small population dispersed across a very large area as a state. We're at the bottom of the River Murray, and so often we get overlooked by the eastern states. I've had people from the eastern states, who shall remain nameless unless you press me later, who've said, why are you bothering to go out on a limb and do all these things that are controversial, doing things that no one else has tried before? Some of these things will fail. Why are you bothering? Why don't you just sit back, let us solve your problems, and you can copy us? But my answer was essentially, I have to curb my language, I know. My answer was essentially, you've never looked after us. At every opportunity, you, the eastern state guys, have tried to do us over as a state. If we're just talking about the River Murray, for example, our interests as a state have never been a priority for you. So unless we stand up for South Australia and do it for ourselves, no one else will. And that's why I'm absolutely committed to us, South Australians, finding our own solutions to our own problems. And yes, that means sometimes investing in new, novel approaches. That means being innovative, trying things that haven't been tried before or haven't been tried here in Australia. And yes, that means sometimes we will fail. But in failing, we will learn very important lessons about how to actually get it better done next time. I don't think we should be concerned about innovating. I don't think we should be concerned about trying new things, putting our own money and resources behind fantastic locally produced ideas. Because in that way, we have successfully, over the last century, done incredible things. We have led environmentally in many areas: container deposit legislation, plastic bag bans, marine parks, incredible number of things. And don't get me started on energy. So I think there is an awful lot in our regions, in our communities, for the state government to get behind in terms of our community and the ideas that you generate locally. Working together, NRM and Landcare can deliver those opportunities and those innovative ideas. And when you do, the government's very keen to support you. Now, I think I should say and make a plug for something that's coming up shortly. Because of this acceptance on the part of government of the importance of Landcare as a very important partner for what we do, the new Premier's NRM Excellence Award will give a very clear focus on the investment strategy that I talked about earlier that was developed with NRM, what our priorities are and what our principles are. Now, I understand the very glamorous Sandy Pitcher, Chief Executive of Juna. Sandy, are you here? She will be. She will be. We'll provide some more detail about this at a conference dinner tonight. Sandy is an incredible dynamo, full of enthusiasm, and will enlighten you to this Premier's NRM Excellence Award. And I hope it will go on to be something that is keenly competed for over in coming years, because it's a way for us, it's our ability to actually acknowledge publicly and broadly some of the fantastic work that NRM does with our local communities. The investment strategy I talked about earlier is recognised by many as leading the way across Australia. We go out and sell it very actively at a national level. When we go to Canberra, we take copies with us. And when I go into state and talk to my fellow ministers, I give them copies and say to them, if there's anything you want to steal out of this, feel free. We're not copywriting it and we won't charge you, because we think it's an excellent document and a fantastic way to show how we in South Australia work together across silos, across government boundaries, local government, state government, NGOs and local communities and business to actually attract investment dollars from the federal government. Particularly, I guess, today from their Landcare, the National Landcare program. And I welcome the Australian government's commitment to the further funding of the National Landcare program. I understand you had a presentation from the Federal Minister today, which would have thrilled you, no doubt, to know that that ongoing commitment from the federal government is there for the next 5 years. It is unfortunate that there is less money than in the past, and what they've done is taken the same quantum of money but spread it out over 5 years instead of 4. But I think realistically we need to understand that the commitment for that long-term funding is great, and if we had to take a haircut, so be it. I would have preferred not to, but nonetheless it is there for 5 years, and now our job is to go out and present the best programs we can to the federal government to attract the lion's share of that funding away from our friends in the other states. Not that we're competitive about these things, but if we put up better programs, we'll get more of the money. And I understand the federal government hasn't yet announced a lot of the details around the program. I understand there will be several opportunities to hear from the federal government about that as the months go by. Initially, we expect a funding stream to come through sustainable agricultural funding programs, but that's yet to be announced. And I understand there is going to be some negotiations between the Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce and Josh Frydenberg about their respective responsibilities in the funding stream. We wait to be told how that will work. I'm as eager, I'm sure, as you are to find that out. But partnerships will be a strong focus. They always are of this funding program. I think we need to maximise the potential of our recent collaboration as communities. We need to be able to go to the federal government and the funding bodies they set up and present to them a united approach, not as individual organisations from the same region asking for the same amount of money, but as a conglomerate of organisations stretched out over a wider geographical area, coming together to say, we all think this is our priority for our region, and we are all going to be involved in it by putting in person power, by putting in dollars, if it's the local government or the state government, whatever, and contributing a massive pool that the federal government can then leverage against, in kind and money. I think that's going to be very attractive to the feds, and I really encourage you all to go back to your respective organisations and talk about this opportunity and then come back together to work out how we can maximise a collaborative approach to access this national Landcare funding. And quite frankly, when my people talk to the bureaucrats in Canberra, they say sotto voce, quite often, we are the best at this. We are the best state because we are coordinated. And they get a lot of grizzles from the eastern states saying, why are you giving South Australia so much money? Well, the fact is we put up better programs. We have better cooperation across regions and community groups, and we have better financial accountability. So let's leverage those assets that we have and go after as much of that federal money as we possibly can. Now, I know that the NRM investment partners are already working with many of the organisations that are represented here today to share and coordinate ideas around this. I just encourage you to reach for the sky and go for as much as you can. And when the Australian Government announces these details of their funding program, it'll be great to see us have programs ready to go, lob on their table before anybody else, really well thought out, really well written, and so well written that they can't say no to us. And I think that'll be an indicator of our success to maximise the investment that we get into South Australia. Focusing your efforts on achieving, I think, major long-term landscape scale results by bringing together investment, as I've just outlined, and effort, will pay off for us. And I really do encourage you to give some deep consideration to that. Beyond funding, we've already taken some big steps in improving our system over time, as I've laid out earlier, to adapt to changing demands and opportunity. There is a lot more that we need to do. There's a lot more that's going on in this space. It's a continuing project of reinventing what we're doing, re-engaging with communities, trying to find out how we can better tell people what we're doing and better engage with people who are doing stuff out there already, trying to coordinate things more closely. So collaboration is a cornerstone of our efforts. It's efficient, it's effective, it's very attractive to federal funders, and I've got to say, it works really well. Now, through this investment strategy and other initiatives that we've outlined, I want to keep in front of you the value of managing natural resources to our communities and our fellow South Australians. Improved reporting on the state and condition of our natural resources is an important part of this. You've got to have data. If you want to prove your case to funders or government or whoever you're responsible to, you've got to have data to show what the baseline was before you came into that space, what your intervention has done to improve the local environment, and why you deserve to get more funding to continue that job. So we need to have a new way of reporting and a new way of giving people confidence that we're actually having an impact, a positive impact, not a negative impact. So to that end, we're working on a new reporting system, a new set of report cards I understand will be coming out later this year. Again, this is an ongoing development area. We need to keep improving this. Other people will catch up with us. Other people will look at what we're doing and say, we need to copy that. And at the same time, we need to have our eyes on how do we actually make this even better, more transparent and more logical. The State of the Environment report is due out next year. It will provide a greater foundation, I think, for further targeting and improving our policy and program settings, but we're really looking for ideas at how we can actually make that process better as well. We're also currently reviewing the state NRM plan with valuable input from the local sectors. I encourage everyone that has a view about NRM to be involved in this. Again, NRM is not something that's static. It's something that we continually want to improve over time. Community involvement and input is vitally important in this process. So I'll be considering the review shortly, and if we do need to update the state NRM plan, if there's some great ideas of how we can take it forward, it will make great sense to do that, I suppose, after the State of the Environment report comes out next year, so that we can make use of any findings and learnings we have from that. But again, it's something that I encourage you to keep an eye on, and it's something we need your input into. I urge you to continue to be involved in shaping our regional priorities through either local government, either through engaging with state government or through NRM boards or through our NGOs. However you do it, the key thing and the key message I hope you've taken from my presentation today is don't work in a silo. Collaborate as broadly as you possibly can. Bring together disparate interests in a community and then decide what your priorities will be as a community. I really see this as a key for South Australia to actually get ahead of other states and to get more funding dollars in from the federal government. I can't say that more often than I possibly can to you, but I think that's the future, and I encourage you strongly to talk about that today. So, thanks for coming along today and being part of this process. Good luck, all the nominees of the Landcare Awards and the Premier's NRM Excellent Awards that Sandy will talk to you about tonight. I hope you enjoy the rest of the State Landcare Conference. And I can leave you with one political plug, and take it or leave it. Very soon you'll be mailed out voting slips from the ABS on a very important choice, whether all Australians should have the right to marry. Please vote yes. Thank you.